lesson 34. Philosophy of the Kleshas. Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, chapter 2, Sutra 9. Abhinivesha is the strong desire for life, which dominates even the learned or the wise. This is the final klesha. It's described a little bit cryptical, in a cryptical way. Strong desire for life, but it's fear. It's basically the final station that most people find themselves in. Fear is paralyzing. Subconsciously, most people are suffering from it and are frozen because of it, unknowingly. Almost all of our decisions, choices in life, one way or another, are influenced by fear. Fear is so strong, such a strong instinct, that even the learned or the wise suffer from it. That is Patanjali's way of saying everybody, no matter how smart, wise, conscious you are, everybody suffers from fear. And there is nothing wrong with that, because fear does have a function. Fear is a mechanism to survive. The reason why we have a problem with it is because fear is not rational. And especially if it is influencing us from subconscious level, we totally have no control over it. Fear is a signal. Thank you. Fear is a signal that alerts us to danger, but very often we are conditioned to react with fear in situations where fear is not applicable. Simple example. I walk with Pada and Babi on the riverside. There is a number of people, quite a lot actually, that only by seeing a dog, they freak out. They react in utter fear. So these days, the words that I use most is 엄청 순해요, 괜찮아요, 엄청 순해요. Because people are paralyzed by fear. Extreme. With no other reason than just seeing a dog. Isn't that called a Pavlov reaction? Right? You see something and you are trained to react in a certain way even though it is not applicable. You know, these dogs, they are so nice. People say, or some people, you know, when they allow the dogs to come close, they say, "Korone, sunane," because I have already said 5 times or 6 times, "엄청 순해요, 엄청 착해요." And they don't believe me first, but then they look again, and they see how they interact with each other and with other doggies. "Korone, sunane." Oh yes, indeed, they're really friendly. fear, in the worst case, panic, either is a signal indicating danger, but very often it is a conditioned reaction that is simply not warranted in that case. Especially when it happens subconsciously, and that is the majority of the people, there's no control. In the example with the dog, your walk in the park is ruined for no reason. They didn't even look at you. They didn't even show any interest in you, and yet you freak out and you go around us in a wide bow, thinking all those damn dogs in the park. And 99.9% of all dogs are friendly. And people see a big dog and they freak out, and they see a small dog and everything is fine. The opposite is true. Small doggies are much worse than big dogs in terms of aggression. Fear. Try first and foremost to become aware of it. Simply become aware of it. Like in the beginning of the course, we talked about energy and how to become aware of energy. Fear is an energy, it's an explosion of energy in Muladhara Chakra. So first just simply observe. That is the start of consciousness, and the start of consciousness leads to rational thought, which leads to control. Do not ignore fear. It has a very important function. Because when it is applicable, when it is warranted, you can avoid danger. Patanjali somewhere says, misery that has not come can and must be avoided. Probably next week we will come across that sutra. So he's also saying, don't be stupid. In other words, don't be stupid. If you're smart, you can see danger coming. You can see kleshas or misery coming. So do stay alert. Do not just dismiss every fear as being a nuisance. But be rational, be sensible. Do not let it freeze you, paralyze you in your life, because then you end up like most people are, stuck in a fixed pattern for the next 40 years, not being able to rise above yourself, not being able to have a dynamic life in which you grow and develop and evolve and take on challenges in a playful way. So fear is something that we need to play with. Once we recognize it, become a little bit your own bully sergeant. This is a natural process. I don't really have to tell you this, but I do it anyway because we have to make this a conscious process. When confronted with fear, and you come to the conclusion that it is not warranted, the next step should be being annoyed with your, again, this reaction. Feeling foolish. That is a kind of the bully sergeant saying, you are stupid, you're incapable of doing that. Just go home and do something else because you don't belong here. That leads to you kind of becoming annoyed. In a more extreme case, you become angry, hatred, that is the klesha before. And that will fuel you to overcome that fear. Last week, I gave you the example of bungee jumping, just to indicate that no matter how hard you try to rationalize, no matter how conscious you are, it doesn't mean that fear is easy to dismiss. Fear is incredibly strong, to the point that it paralyzes you, even when you're conscious of it. That's what Patanjali is saying by relating it to even smart people, wise people, highly educated people. Everybody is subject to fear. Sutra 10. These, the subtle ones, can be reduced by resolving them backward into their origin. The origin of all kleshas is, in the first instance, ignorance. People who don't study about kleshas but practice yoga develop naturally, gradually, a consciousness that does confront them with the kleshas. Basically, consciousness is the opposite of avidya, or ignorance, that stands at the basis of all misery and all the kleshas. So it is only natural that as a person becoming more conscious, drawing conclusions from observations of yourself and your behavior and your actions and reactions, that you will gradually steer towards less kleshas, less misery, less suffering, less confrontation in life. But because you do this relatively subconsciously, as a natural result of your increase in consciousness, it's not yet very efficient and very effective. So we discuss the issue technically, theoretically, with practical examples, and next time, instead of naturally, spontaneously taking control, you do it in a more measured way, which allows you to be much more effective in the process. You have to do effort. Nothing can be achieved without it. So you have to really start paying attention. Be alert to your inner workings. How you feel, how you think, how you act, how you react. But also the results of all that. How does the outside world react towards you? Because it is all connected. If we are miserable, it is because we attract misery. So you have to try to detect what caused it in the first place. Without blame and without guilt. Just objectively determining cause and effect. From the moment that you start doing that, you will begin a very dynamic path in life in which you constantly grow and develop. You'll never want to go back to that gray, paralyzed life based on fear. So, described in the handout is the process. When you're stuck in fear, you have to confront it. I described one situation where I did this very consciously when I came across an installation where you could do bungee jump. I felt the terrible fear with the idea of jumping. So it was something I had to do. Can you see that? Most people react in the opposite way. Struck by fear, you walk away from it. You avoid it. I did exactly the opposite. Another example is, I am super shy. You don't think so, but I am. Believe me. So when I started practicing yoga, that was one of my big obstacles. So instead of hiding, what did I do? I went back to school. Not only to learn, that was one of the things, but to be among people, my contemporaries, people my age. Another thing I did, I went to a martial arts studio, martial arts school, learning Hapkido, be among people, forcibly. And the ultimate thing I did was working in a shop. I started working in a health food shop, and I worked there for the next 5 years. And I had the best time of my life doing so. Why? That shyness, that doesn't exist when you are doing something that you love to do. That's why I can sit here and teach 20 people, and you would never think that I'm shy, right? You never thought of me as being shy. I'm very shy. Always been, and still am. When you are scared of something, confront it. Be your own bully sergeant. I cannot, since I started becoming conscious, before becoming conscious, I would just, without knowing it, avoid everything that I'm scared of. Since becoming conscious, I look for those things. Whatever it is that scares me, if I come to the conclusion that it's essential, important, I look for situations where I have no choice. It's how I got my first kiss. I was 12 years old. I was foolishly in love. You call it puppy love in English. Stupid, foolish. But that's what you are as a child. The shyness just killed me. So one day, we were in the swimming pool, and I forced myself to ask that girl, who I knew was in love with me also, because we were in the same class. It was the first grade of middle school. So you transition from elementary school to middle school, which is a big step for a child. And we always sat in the back of the class, joking and fooling around and flirting, but like children do, very innocent, foolish, stupid. So summer had come, and we were in the swimming pool, and I gathered all my courage and I said, "Will you give me a kiss?" But before she could react, I jumped into the water and I swam underwater half the swimming pool. But I did, and I got my kiss. Fear. Look at it as a challenge, as a play. Do not take unnecessary risk. Do not put yourself in danger. But there are many situations where there is no danger. It is conditioned inside you, but it doesn't exist. That doesn't mean that it's not real, it's real for you. But rationally thinking, you realize, why? Other people are not afraid of this, why should I be? And then you should not allow yourself to walk away from it anymore. It's scary, it's also funny. Play and you feel so good when you overcome your fear. You work in a shop and people really appreciate what you do. The way you interact with the customers, the way the customers reflect that back on you, etc. Life is wonderful. In spite of all, in spite of everything, in spite of the fears and the misery, if you start playing. And with fear, you must put your foot down. You must stomp your feet sometimes and say, what the hell is this? Why? Rationally thinking, there is nothing to be afraid of. Why am I frozen? Why am I so scared? Put your foot down. Actually, it's a quality that you will develop by default, because yogis naturally become stubborn. And in the beginning, that stubbornness can become a klesha, because it ruffles other people's feathers. It may irritate other people. But that's only a temporary stage. First, you have to learn to put your foot down. And once you have adopted that as a new characteristic, then it will mellow out. Then you learn to put your foot down without irritating other people. You become determined, strong-willed. But it has to start somewhere. It starts with a big decision that you make. From now on, I'm not gonna let it happen anymore. I'm not gonna allow people to walk over me anymore. I'm not going to allow myself to walk away from things that are actually important in my life. You deal with that with yourself in that way, you deal with that with the outside world in that way. In the beginning, it causes friction, but more and more your heart opens up. So when you are dealing with anger that you have used to overcome your fear, that's also not good, of course. Anger, hatred, poisons you from inside. It is my guess that all of you, like fear, have a lot of anger. I've been filled with anger, with rage, for years. That fear, that anger would have destroyed me. There was so much resentment, so much blame. But I became a yogi. I started to become connected with my essence, Atma, my true characteristics. And based on that, I moved my life in another direction, a direction not determined by my childhood, my past, but by something that I felt in my heart. But then, time and time again, especially in the first years, you find the past catching up with you. And that's when I drank beer. And one of my brothers drank a lot of beer too, 7 days a week. And another brother used hard drugs, heroin. But I controlled it. I drank beer only on Friday and Saturday. 5 days, absolutely no drop of alcohol. That's the yogi way. need it. That's karma. That is how disturbed you are internally. But you cannot allow it to overtake you, to destroy you, to control your life. So you control it. Only Friday and Saturday night. And Sunday and Monday and Tuesday you are recovering. Wednesday you start to feel good. Thursday you feel great. Friday even better, and then you drink again. 25 weeks a year. But you're going somewhere. Because you do it consciously, you more and more take control of it. While drinking beer, you're lost in your pain, in your misery. Not only that, while I was drowning myself in my blame of everything that caused my misery in the past, I was, on the other hand, I was dreaming of my future, of going to Korea. Mesmerizing, dreaming about that. So the Friday night, Saturday night had as a function to, on the one hand, it was miserable because of the past catching up with me, which I couldn't help. I think it's a necessary process that you gradually can leave behind, but it was more and more replaced by going towards the future. And that past misery, instead of destroying me, became my fuel. Put your foot down in anger, frustration, and canalize your energy, your misery, into achieving your ambitions. And those of, none of you knows me from when I had my own yoga studio, and the first couple of years that I was having my studios in World Gym. But people who know me from that time, they don't have good memories of me. I was a hard-boiled egg. I was a fanatic. Why? Because at that time still my anger was fueling my ambition. Instead of my anger destroying me, it helped me to leave the past behind and to create a new future, more positive and constructive. And then my heart opened up and everything became Ananda. I was not a pleasant yoga teacher in the past. How do you deal with that anger? Use it to fuel a constructive way forward. Actually, these days we have Netflix, but before Netflix, I didn't watch TV much, except I would watch the news. I like to observe people, feel people, and I would watch documentaries. And one of my vices is martial arts, UFC, K1. But I really like, you have these segments on the BBC and CNN where they interview special people. People who are doing something extraordinary, unusual. And it's very often people that have experienced very serious misery, like war, like abuse. And when you hear those people speak, they don't complain about their misery, their pain, their suffering. They have become very passionate about something. And they've canalized all their energy in that direction. believe me, without that bad experience in the past, they would never have become so passionate about that, what they are now working on. And that is the right thing to do with our misery, with our past. Canalize it into something that you feel attracted to. For me, clearly, that is teaching yoga in the right way. Actually, it's not even teaching yoga, it's enlightening people. Helping people to grow, to become stronger, to become conscious. Yoga is just a superficial label, actually. Without my past, I would not be sitting here. I would probably just be a gray mouse office worker or whatever. My dad was a truck driver, so maybe I would have become a truck driver in Europe. Whatever. Just like most people. Just do what you are conditioned to do. But to get there, you first must learn to put your foot down and say, enough is enough. I'm not going to accept my past catching up with me and destroying me. So start taking control. And the way that I'm picturing you is not perfect, because there is no perfection. It's a process. In those years that I was drinking beer, I was processing my past and became in peace with it. And now I don't even think about it anymore. But at that time it was so severe, it was basically determining my day and my night. Subconsciously. And then more and more conscious because of yoga. Put your foot down and go to work. Uncomfortable as that may be, but that's the only way to avoid self-destruction. So when you are confronted with that situation, having overcome fear with anger or hate, you have to take the next step. And that is where you look in the mirror and you say to yourself, it's okay, everything is okay. You start seeing yourself as a vulnerable human being with weaknesses and strength. And you say, all is okay, everything is okay. That is how you activate ego. That is where you will sigh. You will heave a deep sigh of relief. And finally you can move on. Finally you can let it all go and move on. But then you are stuck in ego. The next step is attachment. So I'm turning them around, I think. First, attachment by giving yourself compliments, or if you are working with people, like the bully sergeant, you compliment the troops, or the students, or the patient, and you solve the attachment, you solve the egoism with attachment. When you are at that stage, you have decided for yourself that you are worthy of living, and you then bring it back to ignorance. Ignorance at that point is not ignorance anymore, because of that process that you have gone through step by step. Avidya has become vidya now. Ignorance now has become consciousness. Having gone through that process, you will very soon come to the conclusion that it is not a static process. That you end up in fear again and again. That it is a process that you have to walk through time and time again. So when you look at it the way that it is described, it seems a one-time affair and you've solved all the problems. No. It happens again and again. But now you are conscious, and every time you walk through that process, you become more and more skillful at it. The first time to go from fear back to ignorance can take several years. Then you find yourself again stuck in fear, and it takes only several months. And then you find yourself again stuck in fear, and it takes only several weeks. You become more skillful because you have more experience, more insight, more understanding of how it works. The biggest difficulty most people have is first and foremost to acknowledge what is happening, to be conscious of what is happening. Try to see also this process in terms of relationships. When you fall in love, you are ignorant. And we say ignorance is bliss. Is it? It's only bliss for those who are ignorant. Because in the ignorance, you experience a lot of misery, which you accept as part of the process. But when you fall in love, your energy is here. That is why falling in love feels so good. But what happens out of ignorance? What happens? We become attached. Ego starts to kick in and you become suspicious. Then you become angry. And if you can control yourself a little bit, you end up in fear, both. And you have a very boring, long-lasting relationship where there is no love, there is no passion, everything. You just stay together just because it's safe, it's secure. Because you're afraid to be alone, because you're afraid to do it alone, to live alone, to take care of yourself alone. Many relationships are like that, honestly. Stuck. You see exactly this process at work. That is why unconditional love is so important. Very difficult. Like it is to overcome fear. It's very difficult. Like it is to overcome ego. Very difficult. But the relationship goes from ignorance, bliss. If the relationship is based on love, if the relationship is arranged or based on pure calculation, that's even worse. Then you take huge leaps into the last stage of fear. But try to be aware of that. Try to be aware of that if you're in a relationship. And then try to control your natural way of acting and reacting, because it destroys the relationship. Unconditional love means to be free. Not only to let your partner free, but to be free yourself. That does not mean promiscuous. No way. No way. It means to trust each other. And if your partner is not capable of dealing with that, and start having all kinds of relationships outside of your relationship, then it's not the right relationship for you. It's not the right partner for you. Can you see that? Suspicion, wanting to check your partner's email, text messages, what have you. You recognize? It's fear. And it's so strong, people cannot control it. And what happens? Huge conflict. You have huge fights with your partner. Fear, hatred. You start hating each other. But you tolerate each other because you don't want to be alone. On the other hand, you will want to strangle your partner. But next time when you feel that, realize that it is not your partner who is doing wrong, it's inside yourself. Very difficult, but in practice, you see this process of the 5 Kleshas at work, very particularly in relationships. But also in our career, we get stuck in our career because it gives a certain stability, a certain safety and security to have a fixed job which every month gives you a fixed salary, even the promise of promotion and increasing salary. But in the meantime, we spend 9 or 10 hours a day in a place where we don't want to be, that kills our spirit, our enthusiasm, our happiness. Why? Fear. No matter which way you look at it, it always comes back to fear. I'm not suggesting that you should be foolish and tomorrow quit your job just because your yoga teacher today said everybody's stuck. Then you're more stupid than being stuck. If you come to the conclusion that you're stuck, first determine for yourself what you want to do instead. And it's very likely that you don't know the answer to that yet. It may take a year or several years before you actually have an idea what you really want to do with your life. So how do you deal with that then? Keep practicing yoga, because that is what fuels your consciousness. And start looking at that boring, spirit-killing job as a necessity that will form the jumping board into a future of your choosing. Then your spirit will come alive again, even in that boring job. Because now you have a goal, you have something to look forward to, even if it means that it's 10 years in the future. So be patient and look forward to the future. And if that career, that job is not where you want to be, don't quit. First determine what you want to do instead, and then prepare. You know, one thing that happened to me, and I see with many students also, not all, is that many yoga students become very busy temporarily. A year or 2 years. Why? Because while you are busy with a full-time occupation, you then start preparing for where you want to go in the future. And that takes an investment of time too. If you have to re-educate yourself, get proper qualifications for something that you want to do in the future instead of the job that you have today. You keep your job because it sustains your life, but then you have to spend your evenings or weekends or both to re-educate yourself, to prepare yourself for the future. That is something that sometimes we just have to accept. How do you deal with that? See it as a test of strength. Something that needs to be overcome. It's like an initiation process that you go through. It's hard, demanding, but once you're done, you feel so good about yourself. You've done something you never thought you would be able to do. That's the warrior in you. That is why yogis are warriors. Not because of your sword or your gun, or your big mouth for that matter, but because of your willpower. Once you decide what you want to do, nothing can keep you away from that. Nothing can deter you from that. So it is very possible that for a while you become a hard-boiled egg. But that's what fuels you to do what otherwise would not be possible. Sutra 12. The reservoir of karmas which are rooted in kleshas brings all kinds of experiences in the present and future lives. Buddhism goes out from the point of view that you have to go through 1 million reincarnations. This sutra is telling us we have many different kinds of karma, many of which we are not even aware of, most of which we are not even aware of. Every life that you go through, every reincarnation, you will be confronted with other parts of your karma. Interestingly, the conscious person, the spiritual person, the person on the spiritual path, develops consciousness that makes you go through your karma at a much higher rate than normal, or I should actually say ignorant, people do. Because most people get stuck in fear, they don't live their karma. That is why we need 1 million lives. We are so stupid, in fact, that we avoid our karma whenever we can, staying stuck in our bubble, not exposing ourselves, not coming out of our comfort zone, out of fear. We spend a whole lifetime being very ineffective where it comes to our true essence, dealing with our karma and getting rid of it, processing it, burning it, getting rid of it. Because we're only busy with material things in life. The spiritual person, however, cannot ignore, is not ignorant anymore about the karma. And you go to work. Instead of staying in your comfort zone, you go to work. Everything that is bothering you, you take it on, you roll up your sleeves and you go to work to solve it. One by one, one after the other. Every time you fall asleep, at least in my case, you get stuck again. Very disheartening, very discouraging. So you just want to go back in that process, busy with everything that is bothering you. It's all karma. Everything that is steering you, disturbing you, instead of ignoring it by staying in your comfort zone, you confront it. That is why yoga or Buddhism or any spiritual practice promises liberation at the end of the path, which in a normal condition takes 1 million lives to live through, which you can shorten considerably as a conscious becoming human being, as a spiritual human being. This is what happens. I try to paint you a picture. Try to imagine. You go to Namsan, you go high up in the tower, and you look down. And all you see is thousands of trees. No, what you see a sea of green. Now, better go to Soraksan then. If you go to Namsan, you will only see concrete and asphalt. Go to Soraksan. You go high up on the mountain, and you overlook the valley and the next mountain and the mountain next to that and behind that. And all you see is green. Nothing distinct. That is your karma. You have a certain characteristic, a certain vibration, which determines who you are, kind of, but nothing distinct, really. Just a gray mass, or in the case of you being on the mountain, you see a green sea. Now, that is what the karma of normal people looks like. What is your karma looking like before you start developing consciousness as a practitioner of yoga or another spiritual practice? Becoming conscious starts a process of cleaning up. And what you clean up is everything insignificant. So first you clean up all the brush, all the grass and all the low, small brush on the mountains. Still, there's a huge sea of green. But you clean up all the low growth and the brush and the grass. You create paths, maybe. Now next, you start eliminating all the small trees. Small karma, insignificant still. After you have cleaned out all the small trees, you take out all the middle-sized trees. Now you go back to your mountain and you look down and you see very distinctly, you see 5 or 6 huge trees. You know the sequoia, redwood. Redwood are the biggest trees in the world. I admire those trees. They can be 2,000 years old. Just try to imagine that tree was already there when Jesus Christ was born, when the Romans were carving up part of the world, or Genghis Khan was roaming the Asian continent. Those trees, they are huge in circumference. And they can grow more than 100 meters high. The highest, I think, has been measured to be 135 meters high. You know how high that is? That is 2/3 of the height of the Yuksam building, 63 building. Just thinking of it is just mind-boggling. But that's what's left. Only after clearing all the brush tens of thousands of small trees and thousands of middle-sized trees that were all obscuring these huge redwoods. You've cleared all this up, and there they are, the redwoods. That is your main karma. Strange story, but it gives an indication of the process that you are in. We call it the purification process. And while in the past you were just suffering, but nothing particular, just general suffering, you now become bothered by very specific issues that you were not aware of before. And those are your redwoods. That is your main karma, that is your biggest obstacle in you living a positive and constructive life based on inspiration and compassion, passion and compassion. And that is where you have to work on. That is what you have to work on. That is also why the philosophy of the Kleshas is so important, because all of you will be confronted, subconsciously and more consciously, you will be confronted with actually increasing misery in the beginning of your process becoming conscious. It's called the diseases of the disciple. The diseases of the yoga practitioner is not a disease, it's your increased suffering. You started practicing yoga, you feel amazing, you feel so good. Then comes the day that you start becoming conscious of these redwoods. Your deepest karma starts to reveal itself. And you think, what the hell? I started practicing yoga because it's supposed to be good for me. And look at me now, miserable as I am. That is a temporary stage that is recognized, and therefore it is called the diseases of the disciple. It's an expected temporary stage you will all have to go through. Remember this. When you start to experience misery, increased misery as compared to before, it will happen. It is an expected part of your process, your development, the development that you go through. But remember, most importantly, that it is a temporary stage. That it is something that you need to or will go beyond. Yeah? So yoga is not all new age and hippie style and love and peace. It isn't. It is a struggle. But it is a struggle that makes sense because you know where you're going. And because you feel that you're actually really moving, that you're actually really developing, evolving, as opposed to being stuck as you were before. And the last thing that you need to do, or that you should do, no, the last thing that you shouldn't do, I should say, is to lose yourself in that misery that comes with this karma that you discover. This karma comes in the form of memories of pain. And the first reaction is to identify with the pain, immerse yourself in the emotion, the misery, and to blame the outside world for it. My brother treated me wrong when I was a child. My mom treated me wrong when I was a baby. My uncle and aunt, they were always so nice to my other siblings, but they were unfair to me. these kind of things become very big obstacles for a while. And they will remain obstacles or lead to self-destruction, drowning yourself in beer or going up in smoke of drugs. If you don't go through the process consciously and start using it to shape your future. The natural tendency is this process where you get stuck. That's why this subject is so important, the philosophy of the Kleshas. Because we will get stuck, but then we must recognize it and remind ourselves there is a process we can apply to start using this in a constructive way and get out of it and leave it behind. The things that make you miserable can turn into objects of gratitude. Can you see that? The things that make you miserable, because they can also fuel your ambitions, in the end there is only gratitude. You can turn your misery into gratitude by using your misery in a positive way. And this is what you see in the people that I mentioned being interviewed, because they are special. They are being interviewed, CNN, BBC, as people that stand out. That is exactly what they have done. They have canalized all that energy that is involved in the pain, in the suffering, in the misery, the violence they experience. They have canalized it towards something that brought them away from their misery. They developed a passion for something and canalized all their energy in that direction. When you see those people, you think, wow, they experience so much misery and now it doesn't even exist for them anymore. That is not true. It will always exist. Your pain, my bad memories, they will always exist. But they will come less and less frequently. Until they don't come at all anymore. And if they come once or twice a year, it's like an old friend. Because you turn misery into gratitude. You recognize it, you feel the short pang of pain, and you say, I know you. I know you. I'm done with this. In fact, it has allowed me to do or become what I wanted to be or do. I have to take control. Ajna Chakra, the boss, the commander, the general, Ajna Chakra. Difficult subject, huh? Very important. Questions? I see some dark faces left and right. It's okay. It's very confrontational, and just like having a big, heavy meal, we need to digest this. It can take weeks, months, even years to fully digest all of this. That's okay. Sometimes people do the course twice, even 3 times. I give you more misery. Questions? If questions come up later, just Drop me an email anytime. Let's have a short break.